Is it recording? Hey! I think it is. Cool. Well, hello everybody. I'm speaking in English right now. Obviously. But last week I think I was asked if I could make a video on how I go about studying my languages, and I think or thought that that would be a cool thing to do as well, because I'm a beginner in Chinese and a intermediate in French, and Russian I'll kind of touch on a bit, but really I haven't I literally just started, so that's a little bit more difficult to get into how I study it. But I study Chinese and French pretty differently, so I thought that would be interesting to talk about. And I'm going to do it in English just for the sake of people who want to get an idea of some sort of language learning schedule. In the info box down below, I will put a link to one of my French vlogs, video type things that I made, because, I mean, it's fast forwarded, sped up, but there's a couple little clips of me sat studying, and so you can kind of get an idea of what I do, versus like one of them I'm reading out loud, another one I'm going through the workbook, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Or right now, actually, I'll just start talking about how I study French. So I'm not going to tell you that I sit down and hardcore study every single day, because I don't. That's definitely something I want to get into the habit of. I'm just working to build up on that. However, I do something in the language every single day, whether it be if I'm driving in my car, I will talk to myself in French while paying attention, obviously. Safety first. I will listen to music in French and sing along, and I found that's actually helped me with pronunciation on a few words that have been difficult. Gonna try right now, for example, cœur versus corps, like heart versus body. I hope I said that properly. But for example, if you listen to Le Lac by Julien Doré, I'm pretty sure that's how you say his name. I'll put a link to the song in the description box below. I love that song. It has little bits like that, where there are just nuances in the pronunciation that before my ear couldn't pick up, but now it's making it easier to pick up, it's making it easier to mimic and say different words like that. So I love singing. I'm terrible at singing, but I love using that as a method to learn, and also it just keeps you immersed in the language. And probably the most exciting thing is when you're listening to a song that I listened to back in high school, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can understand it now. The lyrics mean this, or they mean that, and it's really exciting. And then the song just has so much more depth because you can understand it. But yeah, it's really exciting. For example, maybe I'll just link the Spotify playlist that I have below too. You know what? There's going to be a lot of links in the description box. Go look at it after you watch this video. But right, let's really dive into it. So as I said, talking to myself in French all the time, talking with my dog in the car, singing in French helps a lot. I love watching vloggers, French vloggers, either from Canada or from France. Obviously the French-Canadian accent is different, but it's still French. You're still learning new words and learning how the language is used, and I love the French-Canadian accent. I think it's beautiful. I can't do it at all. But yeah, it's just another layer of immersion. I try not to use subtitles, and I found that more and more often I don't need subtitles, which is very exciting. But if you do need subtitles, by all means, if they're there, use them. But yeah, it's just an awesome way to have immersion, because you need to, how do I want to say this? You need to absorb, but you also need to release and use the language. And so absorbing is something you can always be doing. It's a little bit strange when you're trying to learn multiple languages at once. So what I tend to do is kind of block it into chunks. Like if I'm listening to French music, I won't also be listening to Chinese music the next song, because in my head it just kind of gets all mixed up. But I will, for example, have a block of time where it's just French immersion, and then after a break later on, there'll just be Chinese immersion. And sometimes when I'm just chilling and not trying to actively immerse myself, it doesn't matter what language it is. So that's what I kind of do to surround myself in the language. My computer is in English, but my phone is in French. Facebook is in French, Instagram is in French, Tumblr is in French. When I go onto Wikipedia when I go onto Google to search for something, I make my search inquiry in French. I try to read. Yeah, I just try to do everything I can in French. My level of Chinese is nowhere near good enough to immerse myself in that sort of way, so I just kind of stick to watching YouTube videos in Chinese. There aren't very many that put English subtitles, so for me that's more just hearing the cadence of the language and getting used to hearing the different tones and, oh, this is what the third tone sounds like when it's put next to a fourth tone, because sometimes I have difficulty transitioning and making my speech fluid in that sort of way as a native speaker would. So that really helps a lot. And just keeping interested with the culture. Yeah, it's just a good way to learn the language and everything as a whole, because you can't really have one without the other. I'm not sure if that made sense, but I hope it did. So that's really what I do with language immersion. And I do the same thing with Russian. Listening to music, watching YouTubers. YouTube is awesome, you guys. With Russian, though, since I have a lot of trouble with pronunciation, I will also watch how to speak Russian YouTubers as well. I don't really do that with French or Chinese just because I haven't found anyone that interests me, to be honest, and if it doesn't interest me, I don't want to waste my time watching it. I want to do things that make me happy and excited to learn the language and grab my interest, and that's what's going to keep me motivated to try to study almost every day, to continue pursuing the language. What's next? We'll talk about books. For French, I'm currently not using like a grammar book or this book or that book. I am preparing for the DELF exam. I'll be taking the B2 exam in December. I know it seems far away, but I don't know. I feel like I could. My goal is to reach like a solid B2, like even borderline C1 by December, because then I want to take the C1 in 2017 and then the C2 by the end of next year, and yay! That would be awesome. Obviously, fluency is a very loose term in my opinion, but that's a whole nother video. But in terms of books that I'm using to prepare myself for the exam, I'm using this one here. It is backwards. That's fun. It's called Édition Méthode de Français by Didier. It's the 3rd edition. You saw what the cover looks like. And I actually really like it. I'm learning French with a tutor on iTalki. And I love her. She is awesome. We get along really well. She's super easy to talk to. And the lessons are done strictly in French, no English at all. Which is what strictly means. Good job. Yeah, basically what I do, like, in class, we focus mostly on speaking and communication. She'll ask me questions from the book based on a text that I read for homework. So for example, I'm in Unit 1 since I just started, but there will be a page where it has like a bunch of different opinions by different people on, for example, what is France? And then there's a part where you do it's in French and I'm trying to speak in English and it's weird. Writing comprehension, reading comprehension, writing production, so like what would be my experience with France? What do I think of it? Do I think that what the other people are experiencing are stereotypes, or are they relevant to my view of France? Then there's vocabulary. For example, with the B2 there's a lot of argumentative elements with it. So like, je pense que, je suppose que, je suis d'accord avec toi parce que, etc. And then there's questions that you're supposed to respond to out loud and give examples as to why. And so I do all the writing bits and the reading bits and responding to those questions by myself. And then in class, I will send her what I've written so she can check my grammar and everything. But then also we talk about why I think what I think and why this and why that. And it's really cool. There's a lot of vocabulary to learn, and I sit down and I read through everything and I make sure that I know what everything means, and I try not to just go onto word reference and look up the English equivalent. I try to go onto there's a dictionary called Larousse, and it gives you the definition and example sentences and how the word is used, which is really nice. If from there I don't understand what it means, I'll go onto word reference and look it up. But I try to keep everything in French, because then it's making a web of connections in my mind, and oh, this word goes to this word, which can also be equivalent to this word, and you use this structure and you use it in this example, and so it's just kind of building this big web in my mind of French. And there's CD listening exercises, so you pop in the audio. Personally, I have to listen to it 2 or 3 times. The first time I'll read through the questions, then I'll listen to the audio just to get a feel for the pacing and what they're saying and stuff. And then I'll listen through it again, trying to respond to the questions, and then a 3rd time if I've missed anything. I think in the actual exam you only get to listen to it twice, but I have a while to keep going. I try not to look at the transcription. And then there's little bits on grammar. There's letters. For example, yesterday I read a letter by Montesquieu, and we do the same thing where I write a response about it. And then there are the questions where I respond out loud without writing down what I want to say. I try to make it more spontaneous. I'll think about what I want to say, and if I need a few vocab words, then I'll do that. But I try to make it as spontaneous as possible. It's difficult, but I know that with practice it will get easier. This might be way more in depth than what anyone was asking for, but that's what I do. I also keep a notebook in conjunction with it. It mainly has vocab written down in it, or like little grammar points written down. So this is just kind of what it looks like. Again, it's backwards, I'm sorry. I doodle. You know, it's just, it kind of becomes like a very organic journal. I do journal in here actually, it's in French. I don't care if you read what it says. It was about when I went to... Oh, this is when I just moved back from France. That was like, I couldn't believe it was 2017 and I just wanted to go back to France. But yeah, it's just all in French, trying to keep everything in French, very organic. It's definitely not like Pinterest bullet journal worthy, but it's my brain on paper basically. Helps me remember stuff, and it's been really, really helpful in my language learning process. For Chinese, maybe I should make this into 2 videos. You know what? It'll be okay. Don't freak out. I actually have to go in 5 minutes. This might be a 2-part video. Textbooks for Chinese, I also have a tutor. She's an in-person tutor because I'm a very kinetic learner. With French, since I've been learning it a lot longer, it's easier for me to talk with someone through Skype. But with Chinese, since it's a lot more recent, and I feel like the language is a lot more kinetic in a way. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but it really helps to have someone in person. We're using this book. It's Integrated Chinese Level 1 Part 1 because I'm a beginner, but that's cool. I'm actually over halfway through the book though. I'm on chapter 7 now. But it has kind of two parts. It has a dialogue bit and it has a grammar bit, and then it has an exercise bit. And so we'll say for the first class when we start a new chapter, we'll start with all the vocabulary, the breakdown of the characters, what each one means. We kind of get into the radicals and stuff of it as well, but that's just because I'm personally interested in that. I love the complexity of the characters and how much depth there is and the history in it. I find it fascinating, so I really enjoy that bit, and it helps me distinguish similar looking characters and how to write them as well. So that's pretty cool, in my opinion. But then we go through the dialogue, the grammar points, but we don't follow the textbook per se. She uses the textbook as a guide, and we really delve into all of the grammar points and how to use the language conversationally. So it's really quite in depth. And then I go home and I review the notes that she's provided, because she types it all out, because there's no way I could write that fast. I don't even have all the characters memorized for writing. I can read them, but not for writing. And then I will read through the dialogue out loud multiple times. I will read through the grammar sections again, and I'll do kind of practice dialogues just by myself. She gives me homework to do in the workbook as well, which I really enjoy because, again, as I said, I'm a very kinetic learner, so I love writing by hand, and for me that's the best way to memorize characters, memorize grammar structures, memorize new things, and just really ingrain it into my brain. So we do that. I don't know if you want to see an example. I'm just going to show off because I'm really proud of my writing. It could be wrong. I don't think it is. We didn't check that bit. It could be wrong. But yeah, and as you go through, they get maybe more complicated. I don't know. But I'll go through that, and we finish half a chapter to a full chapter per week. And so between each lesson, I just kind of pace myself, and by the time I have my next lesson, my workbook is done. I've revised through the dialogue and the vocab and the grammar and stuff like that. So I can't really say on this day I do this and on this day I do that. It's just kind of pacing myself. And same with French. I don't sit down and do everything from the chapter at once. I kind of pace it, so I might do like 2 pages a day if that is logical for that section. So there's that. I really like the books that I just mentioned to you. They are kind of expensive, but I think they're worth it. I used to use the New Practical Chinese Reader. It does not go into very much detail about grammar, or not nearly as much as this one. It's a fine book if you want to use it. It has the audio CD. It's also very nice, but yeah, I just prefer this one a lot more. In terms of Russian, I also have a Russian teacher on iTalki. I love iTalki, if you can't tell. I think it's great. But we are not using a textbook with that just because she doesn't like using a textbook, and her explanations and examples in our practice dialogues are really, really helpful, and I think better than a textbook would be for me for Russian. Just kind of like with each language, I use a different system to learn it, but it's also all pretty similar, I think, in a way. I haven't had any Russian homework yet because I've only had one lesson in Russian, and it was more of an introductory lesson to see her teaching style and if we'd get along, and we got along really well, and I loved her teaching style. So right now I'm just revising the vocab so I can remember what I've learned and not start over when we have our next lesson. So let me try to think. Recap. Too lazy didn't watch at the end of the video, or I might put this at the beginning. Step 1. Immerse yourself in the language. Can be difficult to do if you're learning multiple languages, but try to chunk them up throughout the day. And also if you're learning ones that aren't similar, for example, Russian, French, and Chinese aren't that similar, you don't really get it mixed up in your head. I personally do language immersion through music, talking to myself or the dog, and through reading. And then textbooks, quasi-textbooks that I use for French, the actual textbooks I use for Chinese. And I don't use textbooks for Russian, I just use the notes that my teacher makes individually for each student, which is what works the best for me. Try to space out your learning throughout the week. My sat down hardcore focused learning is not every day, but I'm doing something for the language every day, if that makes sense. For example, if I don't do something out of my French book, one day I'll still be immersing myself in the language and using it. It just won't be in an academic setting. Same with Chinese. If I'm not sat down doing my textbook, I will at some point in the day be listening to music or trying to learn vocab or watching a YouTube video or something like that. So it doesn't have to be this grand, stressful, hardcore, go focus thing. It just kind of comes more natural, and eventually you'll get into the rhythm of what's comfortable for you, what helps you optimize your productivity. And finally, lessons. For me, that helps a lot because it gives me accountability. I love having a teacher that's very enthusiastic about their language and culture and sharing it, and it kind of gives you an insider view onto the culture. And it's just very exciting, and each week I'm looking forward to my lesson, and I think that's a very helpful, nice thing. Plus it helps with listening and responding, whereas my dog is not going to respond in French. He's starting to understand French now, though, which is kind of cool. He's not fond of Chinese, but I'm working on it. We'll get there. He'll like it eventually. But yeah, I think that is key. I'm also going to be start trying to go to a few meetup groups that are in town. For example, have a Chinese lesson a week and plus go to one Chinese meetup group a week. Same with French, have a French lesson a week, go to one French meetup group per week, just so I can speak with other people and use it more. If you want to make YouTube videos, do it. It's super helpful. It feels super awkward at first, but then it's just kind of like, it gets easier. Even if I still am super awkward about it, it gets easier. And I've found that it's starting to get easier for me to just let the words come out when I'm speaking in French. I need to start practicing for Chinese, and once I know Russian after more than just a week, then I'm sure it will help a lot with Russian too. I think that's about it. I actually have to go now. I have 5 minutes has turned into 10 minutes later, and we're gonna be late. And I think my tea is cold. Oh well. I hope this was helpful. I hope it was answered the request. If it didn't answer what you wanted to know, let me know and I'll make another video. that's maybe of me actually studying. I don't know. Let me know what would be helpful. But yeah, talk to you later. Bye.